Hello again, Dark Readers. I'm Sarah, and this is The Dark Spine, the place where we peel back the pretty cover and dig into what's festering underneath. If your reading taste runs toward the twisted, the morally ambiguous, and the emotionally scorched, you're in the right place. And do I have a pretty cover for you? Today, we're talking about How to Kill Your Family by Bella Mackie, a novel that left me circling the drain of ambivalence. I wanted to love it. I really did. This was a book that I wanted to read with my book club. We all wanted to read it, and we were so excited to choose this book, and I did really want to love it. The premise is killer, literally. The title is razor sharp. It screams satirical noir. It promises bite, blood, bitter humour. And on paper, it had all the markers of a book I should adore. The story centres on Grace Bernard, a young woman imprisoned for a murder she didn't commit, which is ironic because she has committed several others. She just didn't get caught for those. From a prison cell, Grace narrates her story in the form of a written confession/manifesto, taking us step by step through the people she's killed, why she did it, what it's like to be a sociopath with a very specific family vendetta. Grace's father is Simon Artemis, the obscenely wealthy CEO of a fashion empire. He abandoned Grace's mother when she was pregnant. Worse, he knew she existed, refused to acknowledge her, and left her and her mother to rot in poverty. When her mum dies young, alone and bitter, Grace decides the Armitage family is going to pay for that neglect, and so one by one, she picks them off. Sounds juicy, right? And at times, it is. There are passages, often when Grace is railing against the elite, dissecting the hollow rituals of influencer culture, that absolutely sing. Mackie has a gift for a certain kind of sardonic voice, a very British, dry tone that works best when it's skewering something real. But here's the thing. For a novel driven almost entirely by a single character's voice, that voice has to be unforgettable. You have to feel them, understand them, love them, hate them, fear them, like them, something. But Grace never quite clicked into focus for me. She's meant to be our anti-heroine, cold, calculated, clever, the kind of woman you could walk past in the street and you'd never suspect a thing. And I get that that's the point. She's not supposed to be likeable in a way, but she also never felt alive to me. I didn't believe her. Her emotions, when they appeared, felt flat. Her anger, clinical. Her murders, efficient to the point of being forgettable. And while I can appreciate the attempt to subvert the usual emotionally messy, overly sympathetic female killer trope, the result is a character who feels like a sketch of a villainette, without the menace, or a parody of Amy Dunn without the layered psychodrama. The structure doesn't help. The book's told almost entirely in flashback. Grace is already in prison, she's writing this like a diary or maybe an unpublished memoir, and because of that, we lose the immediacy. The tension's gone before we begin. We're not wondering whether she'll succeed. We know she did, mostly. We know she's been caught, and we know she's angry about being caught for the wrong murder. That should be fascinating, but somehow it just isn't. Even when you're wondering, well, who has she killed? to get into prison, it still just doesn't draw you like it should. Each chapter is devoted to a different family member, and one by one Grace infiltrates their lives under various aliases and comes up with wildly different methods of dispatch. There's an uncle who is so self-important. There's a cousin who has tried to escape the family and has become an activist, but even he's not safe from Grace. Her grandparents, who, they just remind me of like your stereotypical new money rich people. These people should be juicy, but they're painted in such a broad way that they barely register as people, let alone victims, and their deaths weirdly anticlimactic. Even the uncle's death, and that, no spoilers, but that is not a normal death. It is quite strange, but it still doesn't give you that emotion that you should have. There's no real build-up, no mounting dread, no messy cleanups or close calls. Grace walks in, executes the plan, sometimes literally, and walks out. Done. They read like bullet points in a diary rather than scenes in a novel. There's an assassin's efficiency to them, but no suspense, no grit, not even any real blood, which is odd considering the book is about killing your entire family. You'd expect chaos. You'd expect something to go wrong, for her to have to adapt and scramble, maybe show some cracks, but the narrative never allows for that. Grace remains the same, calm, acidic, unreadable throughout. And when someone is emotionally flatlined for 300 pages, it gets a bit numbing. Now, thematically, there are some things that do work. The book wants to explore privilege, generational wealth, institutional callousness, and how easily society forgets those left behind. Grace's fury at the injustice she's endured, being poor, being invisible, watching her mother die from neglect, is understandable. A sense of moral entitlement for revenge is, in its own way, the most honest part of her. She sees herself as a sort of moral equaliser, destroying the lives of people who never acknowledged hers. But there's a version of this book, maybe a little darker, maybe a little slower to play its cards, that could have explored that rage more deeply, dug into the trauma underneath. But How to Kill Your Family doesn't want to be a psychological character study. It wants to be a satire, a thriller, a comedy, a murder memoir, and it ends up being a little too much of everything and not quite enough of anything. Let's talk about the twist. And yes, spoiler alert here, so if you haven't read the book and want to go in blind, skip ahead about a minute. And if you're still here, so the twist is essentially that Grace didn't kill all of her family. There is one member of her family that someone else killed. And that person, unbeknownst to Grace, is intrinsically linked to Grace and feels the same way as Grace does about her family. But instead of that being a oh my goodness moment, it's kind of just there. It doesn't change how we view her. It doesn't complicate the story or her morality. It doesn't reframe the narrative. It just adds another person that's joining in with her hit list, really. And then end. Abrupt, blunt. It felt like the book built a long, slow fuse only to fizzle out in the rain. Somebody who had already read this book told me that it does get darker. And I don't know if it's just me, but it never got darker. I was constantly waiting for it to just hit home a bit more, and it never did. So now let's talk tone, because I think this is where most readers either get on board or jump off. This is a book with the air of a black comedy, but a lot of the humour is acidic without being sharp. It critiques everything, to trust fund babies, to yoga mums, to social media types, but in a way that can start to feel like it's trying too hard to be edgy. The voice is cynical, yes, but not always in a clever way. And when your main character is the book's voice, that matters. And for me, it started to feel repetitive. Grace is smug, the world is fake, her targets are horrible, repeat, and without a counterbalance, some emotional depth, some inner conflict, some sense of cost. It's hard to care. Grace is never really challenged. Not emotionally, not psychologically. She doesn't unravel, and maybe that's the point. But it doesn't make for a particularly gripping read. So, final thoughts. How to Kill Your Family isn't a bad book. It's ambitious, it's sharp in places, and it's absolutely trying to do something different. I admire Bella Mackie for leaning into a morally void female lead and not making her sexy or tragic or digestible. That alone is rare. But for me, the novel ended up being more interesting as a concept than as an experience. It promises murder, misanthropy, and moral grey areas, but it delivers them with such clinical distance that the darkness never quite seeps in. I can't help thinking that if an author like Lisa Jewell or Frida McFadden would have written this book, this review would have been completely different, and I possibly would have enjoyed it a bit more. I gave it 3 stars on Fable. 1 for the killer premise, 1 for the flashes of genuine wit, and 1 for the fact that I do think Mackie has a distinct voice, one I'd be curious to see evolve in future work. But if you liked it more than I did, I'd love to hear why. Did you connect with Grace? Did the satire work for you in a way it didn't for me? And if you've read anything else in this unlikable female narrator with a body count genre that actually delivers, please let me know. I'm always looking. As always, thank you for joining me on The Dark Spine. If you like reviews that don't shy away from messiness, books that flirt with disaster even when they don't quite seduce, please subscribe, share, and stay tuned. Until next time, stay sharp and maybe think twice before plotting a murder memoir in prison.